Hello, welcome to A Sunny Book Nook. My name is Sunny, and I have a problem with lesbian romance novels. I read a variety of genres. I read basically every genre. I will admit that the majority of what I read is literary fiction, and a lot of speculative fiction as well. Lesbian literary fiction is often, not always, but is often pretty good in my opinion. This is all my opinion, okay? The thing is, I have a couple reasons as to why I think lesbian romance novels specifically are not that good. Why the genre doesn't really lend itself to good writing. Looking at some of the specific lesbian romances that I've read over the years and how I think they just fall short and fail at doing the thing that romance novels are supposed to do and that I have gotten from romance novels of other sorts. I have read straight romance novels and male gay romance novels. I've read historical romance novels and contemporary romance novels. I haven't read any fantasy romance novels, really. I mean, I think I read like ACOTAR once, like years ago, and I thought it was fine. And I read, what's the fairy one that everyone likes? Holly Black? Yeah, that one. I read the first book to that as well, and I thought it was fine as well. But I am a lesbian reader who reads lesbian books. What I identify as lesbian books, and a lesbian novel, lesbian literature, a lesbian romance novel, is obviously at the center of it are two female characters who get together, or a lesbian relationship that is at the center of the novel, or lesbian dynamics and themes that are really present. That to me is what makes a lesbian novel a lesbian novel. Of course, with romance novels, FF romance is its own thing, and like that is lesbian fiction, that is lesbian romance, that's the lesbian romance genre. Oftentimes, and this gets into my first point, I've noticed that many FF romance novels, the two female main characters that get together are not lesbians. That's fine, okay? That's fine, but I just don't think it is necessarily a good representation of reality, if that makes sense. Like, from what I understand, romance novels are, of course, a level of escapism and a way of inserting yourself into something that is appealing or experiencing. It's like all other forms of literature, right? Form of escapism and is immersive. But something that I find is kind of takes me out of a lot of the romance novels that I read is that most of these love interests and main characters are both bisexual or pansexual women who have male exes who sort of feature in the stories as well. Some examples that I'm going to bring up are actually, I'm gonna look on my phone for this because I have screenshots of like 25 different romance novels that I've read over the last 2 years or 3 years-ish that I would identify as like having some of these things that I think are some of my problems, I guess, with lesbian romance, the lesbian romance genre, FF romances. For example, in the book Something to Talk About by Meryl Wilsner, which follows this, it's like a fake dating Hollywood assistant and an older woman who is a really famous actress, or an actress who's like, you know, pretty well known in the Hollywood circles, and the assistant is definitely like I think she has male exes from what I remember. I read this a while ago, and Jo, the Hollywood actress, she just like vaguely does not have any exes, or like no one knows her sexuality, and that feels to me that's not really how lesbian romances are in real life. And I think like that's what makes it different from male romances and like straight romances, is that oftentimes for those books, like I haven't read any Emily Henry, for example, but like for other contemporary romances that I've read that aren't lesbian, these characters are coming from positions that make sense, are realistic, and that I encounter, you know, like people who are out and proud in a way that their identities are like really central to their life. And I think that a lot of the sexualities of characters in female-female romances, that's not really necessarily the case, I've noticed, which I think like that doesn't make sense. Every lesbian I know is really proud to be a lesbian, and also every lesbian couple I know is usually comprised of two lesbians, not two bi women. Sometimes it's one bi woman and one lesbian, but to be honest, like I just feel like it seems like a lot of these romance novels are kind of, even while being lesbian fiction, are kind of lesbophobic in the way that they exclude lesbian experiences and are very still centered on previous relationships that women have with men and the aftermath of those things, which that is also a true experience of many people and many bi women and lesbians even in like my life. But I think that especially for the female like romance genre, it's so unfortunate that that is the case specifically for like lesbian romances when I feel like that's not really the case for gay romances and for straight romances. Your ex, oftentimes like the exes in gay romances are like also men, or in straight romances, it's not like, obviously there's not that issue of having to contend with your identity. And I don't know, I find it a little disingenuous at a certain point, I suppose. But I don't know, maybe I'm wrong for that. This is just a general trend that I'm noticing. Like, even in lesbian literary fiction, and this is just for lesbian fiction in general, so much of what is published and what is on the market and the books that are out there feature characters who are not lesbians but get involved in lesbian relationships, or the center of a lesbian novel ends up not really being around the lesbianism of it. And I think people have talked about this like on Twitter or whatever before, but it's just frustrating, I suppose. And I don't know, I've made a lot of videos on this channel recommending lesbian literature and sapphic literature that deal with it thematically or in terms of the romance or, you know, across various genres. So you should check those out if you want to, as books that are counter to the books that I'm not really into here. But I think that the female romance genre has that issue of like, it's kind of lesbophobic in the way that lesbians aren't really, and lesbian identity isn't really featured in a way that makes sense for, that you would imagine it would be for the genre. And a lot of these characters are, you know, it's oftentimes like two bi women who are very like feminine that end up like getting together, which leads me to my second main issue, which is that I think that it's really unfortunate that a lot of lesbian romance novels feature two love interests who are feminine. That doesn't really sit well with me because it's a really appealing and normative way of presenting lesbianism and lesbian relationships, if that makes sense. Because gender nonconformity within lesbianism, like being a masculine woman, being a butch, being, you know, being gender nonconforming, being transmasculine within the scope of lesbianism, like these things are just not ever really explored in contemporary lesbian romances in a way that I think is so unfortunate and disingenuous and not true to people's experiences. Like, again, in my life, I'm in community with, and I know a lot of lesbians and people in lesbian relationships, and I really don't know of any, I don't think, that are, maybe like one couple of like the dozens that I know that are like two bisexual women or two bisexual feminine women, which is what is seems like to be the majority of these books. Like most of Alexandra Bellafleur's books, and Alexandra Bellafleur is a major female contemporary romance author, and that's basically all of her characters. And then with Ashley Herring Blake, in the first book of her Bright Fall series, Delilah Green Doesn't Care, I mean, she does a similar thing again. Like, it's two two bi women who get together, I think, or it might be one lesbian and one bi woman. It varies between all of her books, but it's always like two feminine women or two more feminine than masculine women, I guess, getting together. And I think that it's kind of, again, it's strangely, it's lesbophobic in some way because it feeds into this idea of like, oh, we're not like those ugly, mannish, hairy, fat bull dykes. We're like pretty women just like everyone else. Like that's what a lot of these covers, and I'm going to put some examples on here, really give off, I guess. And I don't know, that doesn't sit right with me. And I think like this really encompasses the vast majority of the genre. And I think it has to do with the publishing industry itself, and it has to do with what people are writing and comfortable with writing. In the Ashley Herring Blake books, I also noticed that, and actually on my podcast, The Lavender Menace, where we talk a lot about lesbian media and critically examining a lot of that, one of our listeners emailed us and mentioned how in Delilah Green Doesn't Care, the first book in the series, Ashley Herring Blake never uses the word lesbian, ever. One of the love interests is a bisexual woman who has a child. The other woman, Delilah Green, is, I don't even remember if she identifies as, I think she's gay, like I think she's a lesbian, but again, I don't, like, it's only ever used, the word itself is only ever used once in passing. That's so unfortunate. Like, people are scared of the word lesbian. People I think are way more comfortable with terms like sapphic and with the identities of like bisexual for women currently, even in lesbian romance novels, in a way that's like, that's not true to life. Lesbians are very proud to be lesbians. People in lesbian relationships are very proud to be in a lesbian relationship. And that's like, I don't know. It's hard to even engage in the escapism of a romance novel that you're supposed to when that's what I'm thinking about. Like that, once again, it's so frustrating, or that it's annoying, that twinge of annoyance again when like the characters are yet another sort of representation of something that like I've seen a million times before that doesn't feel realistic to like how people actually engage in like lesbian community. But I will say that I'm speaking specifically about like adult romances here because young adult romance novels, I have a lot more leeway. I feel like they are often A, better written, and B, much more compelling because they're dealing with other themes besides the core of like just romance. Like oftentimes they're dealing with like family and loss and growing up and being in an environment of like school or, you know, working. Like oftentimes that's what a lot of these young adult female romance novels are doing. I think a lot of times they're done really compellingly and really well. But I don't think that is the case for a lot of adult contemporary female romances. For example, I mean, I think young adult romances that are done really well are by Kelly Quinlan. And perhaps some of the things that I'm identifying as I think are like problematic a little, or that I find concerning as like a trend within lesbian romance, might be identifiable in some of Kelly Quinlan's work. But I think that as a whole, the writing and the characters like kind of make up for it. Whereas a lot of these other books, like there's no redemption for that in that regard. Like in Kelly Quinlan's books, Late to the Party and Her Name in the Sky, and there's another one about the basketball player and the cheerleader, like all of them feature characters who are, even if they're not grappling with their sexualities within the context of these books, they are in environments that are like restrictive of like, you're in high school. Some of these girls are like out or out to certain people and trying to navigate that. And I think all of that is really interesting. Whereas something like in Ashley Herring Blake, in Ashford Parker Doesn't Fall, I think is the book, one of our main characters is a straight woman who, the whole queer friend group, who then like contends with her sexuality as she falls for Jordan, the other character. And I don't know, I think like, again, she has to come to terms with her queerness in this environment it's interesting because it's an exploration of an angle of like being an adult and coming out as opposed to like the youth queer experience. But in Ashley Parker Doesn't Fall, the romance itself, to me, doesn't really hold water, and again falls into this thing of like, she doesn't use the term like lesbian for Jordan, the other character. Even though Jordan is a lesbian, Jordan talks about how she dates like women and non-binary people, and like that's, I think, explicitly a sentence within the first few chapters. And Jordan, I think someone mentioned like, oh, I thought Jordan was butch, but and I offhandedly mentioned this in my wrap up, I think, like jokingly being like, well, there's like a scene where she's like putting on mascara and eyeliner in like the car, and it's not like, okay, you don't have to not wear makeup. Like there's no rules for like, oh, to be butch you have to be A, B, C, D, D. Like, no, that's not how that shit works. But I think that like, even when a character like Jordan has, short hair and is a carpenter and, does these things, like these authors for some reason always like feminize these characters instead of leaning into a potential masculinity, and it's really strange. But then when love interests are masculine, then sometimes things also get kind of weird. In One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston, okay, to be fair, I did not finish this book because I found it so fucking insufferable. We once again have a bisexual, feminine, female main character, but now we have a butch Asian character, like from the past. One of my friends was talking about how, and also many people have commented on this, how the fetishization or the tokenization of the butch character, and also the way that race is utilized in this book. Our white main character is surrounded by these like people of color, including the love interest, who are all like, they only serve this role to bolster her because we're in her perspective the whole time, and they don't really exist as real people in the capacity that our main character does. And I think like that is something that is also pretty evident in like Ashley Herring Blake's writing. In the most recent book in the series, Iris Kelly Doesn't Date, if I remember correctly, Stevie is, again, one of those like kind of more futchy, but not fully, can't lean into the masculinity because why the fuck would they do that? Stevie is like this theater person, and her best friend, Ren, is a non-binary Japanese American person. It's like really dapper. But Ren only serves this role to help Stevie. Like Ren only shows up to be this magical fairy to like help Stevie out. Like that's the only role they serve in the story. And it's kind of crazy. Like it was just wild. And then at the end of the book, we saw this stud character, and I was like, woo, because finally like a black butch character in a lesbian romance novel, like, and it was Stevie's like acting teacher from college, who again serves this role to like offer something to Stevie and to give Stevie something and like then leave. Like, I think white female romance authors, they have a real issue with contending with race. In Something to Talk About by Meryl Wilsner, our main character, Jo, she is an Asian American actress, and the way that she's described almost feels like it's leaning into like a sort of dragon lady trope, or sort of like, she's like sexy, but she's like controlling and an overlord and like looking above others. It's very strange. Me and my podcast co-host Renaissance actually discussed Something to Talk About as the novel in one of our podcast episodes. I'll link it below if I remember. Hopefully I remember. But we shit talked the fuck out of this book because we both like really disliked it. And Renaissance had like so many notes about how bad the writing was. I guess that's my third point, which is like the writing is so bad in a lot of this, to the point where it's like forgettable. And I don't know whether I haven't read enough of the romance genre to be able to assess like whether it's really bad. Because I know, like, I've seen the video essays about book talk romance and whatever. Like, I know it can get bad, but there's some things that I'm like, this is not how is this being published? I feel like I'm reading fan fiction that is better than this, and me and Renaissance talked about this in terms of reading Meryl Wilson's Something to Talk About. And Meryl Wilson recently came out with a new book as well, and I started reading it, and I was like, the writing is so bad. And Meryl Wilson, I actually think, is butch. But again, all of her main characters, all the characters that she writes are all these like feminine, long-haired, make-upped women. And I'm like, as one of those myself, as one of those lesbians myself, I would never date someone else who looks like that, okay? I'm femme for butch, as is a lot of, I mean, it's a subculture, but like, where are the butches? In romance novels, where are the butches? We're looking around and there's not that many, okay? Like, we're starving. We're starving. And then the butches that we do get, like in One Last Stop, it's terrible. It's terrible. It's like weirdly racist. Some examples of like really bad writing I would identify is, okay, I read this book called In Bloom by Allie Keene about like a floral shop owner who's a baker and like this 40-year-old bridal shop owner. I don't remember shit about that, but I remember that it was forgettable and it was not well written. Oh, and I read, oh my gosh, Breaking Character by Lee Winter. Another Hollywood, sorry, I feel like that's another trope in lesbian romance is like Hollywood lesbian secret romances, which like, I guess I get it, but I don't know if that's my appeal. I think it might be the Evelyn Hugo influence, the Evelyn Hugo effect, but it's like, you know, I don't remember anything about this book, but I do remember that it was not good. Poorly written, and the whole concept and plotting of it was just terrible. Another example, Fixer Upper by Cara Malone. Terrible. Okay, this book stands out in my mind as a book that was really poorly written about like this woman who like moves into this house that like was left to her or something, and she like has to like fix it up. I don't remember shit about this, but I remember that it was bad. Oh, okay, and Anyone But You by Chelsea M. Cameron. This this is about a CrossFit gym owner and then a yoga studio owner who moves in above. And like their romance, and I remember being like, it's kind of hate to love. Like, I feel like there's such a lack of sexiness and tension as well in these romance novels, which is so unfortunate because it's like the whole point of you guys is to be sexy. Like, I want to be immersed in the sexual tension of it all, but I don't really find that in the romance genre specifically. I find that sometimes in like literary fiction, sometimes in fantasy that has a sapphic plotline at the center of it, but I don't know. Female romance just doesn't hit the mark for me in a way that like other types of romances have. It's concerning, okay? I'm like, this is the reasoning that like I'm justifying this to myself, because I'm also putting this out to you guys and putting this out into the world because I want to know, like, am I crazy for this? I feel like other people have to be thinking this as well, right? Like, I can't be the only person in the world trying to search for one good lesbian romance novel. Which, speaking of, I don't want to just be hating in this video. I will speak to some lesbian romance novels that I did enjoy, even if they did fall into a couple of the issues that some of the things that I do take issue with. Like I said, I think that young adult female romances can often be better than just adult contemporary romances because the stakes are different and the writing style is different and oftentimes better because the audience is different, you know? But at the same time, like, somehow, even though it's for a young adult audience, the writing and the voice is more mature. Like, I really liked How to Excavate a Heart by Jake Maya Arlo. It's about this girl who ends up dog walking for this other girl's dad's dog, and it's during the holidays, and one of them had just gotten out of a really toxic relationship with this girl at her college, and I was like, oh, finally a female ex. like because that's real. Like, I know so many people who had like a really toxic first year relationship at college, a really toxic lesbian first year relationship at college, and then like get into something new after that that's like really amazing, or, you know, go through some shit after that. Like, I'm like, that's real. I feel like young adult novels have more of a commitment to being real in a way that like romance novels can try to get away with, and it becomes very unconvincing, I suppose. Another type of romance novel that I think female romances do better in is historical romances. Like, I think female romances kind of thrive in that area. I mean, I just like historical romances myself, like, regardless of the type of relationship, because that's just a type of romance that I feel like I fuck with more. And also, again, like, the stakes are higher, or they're different, at least. There's a different level of, like, needing to commit to realism in a way that I think the contemporary genre tries to get away with not doing. Some of my favorite historical fiction female romances, I've talked about this one a lot, and that is The Perks of Being a Wallflower. This one is really cute, and I think the cover is a total misrepresentation of the couple, because one of the main characters in the love interest is a like cross-dressing woman who takes on the identity of like a count in order to court this other woman. So like it's very gender bendy and like queer in that way, and it's so fun. And it's also like a really feminist novel about like the blue stockings in England, if you're familiar with that history, and sort of the way that our main character is kind of a class traitor Robin Hood type figure orphan. And I thought that a lot of those elements were fun, and the romance was super compelling and sweet. So I think like that's an example of something that really worked for me. But a contemporary romance that really worked for me that was butch femme, but the femme character was bisexual, was Kiss Her Once for Me by Alison Cochrane. This is a holiday romance. Another issue I have with female romances, or just romances in general, is like an emphasis on a difference in power dynamic. And here it's kind of evident as well, because the butch character is from like a really wealthy family. She's been like cut off from it, but there's that. But their whole romance and their dynamic is really cute because they have like a whole meet cute situation. And then for the year after, the bisexual main character, she is an artist and she makes comics. So she's been doing a web comic about that wonderful date that she had with our other main character like a year ago. Basically, the whole romance is very cute. And I think like the course of their dynamic and the tension that builds, I really liked it, and I thought it was well written. And that's sort of like, that's the thing. You know how love covers a variety of sins, or whatever the fuck Peter said in the Bible? No, love covers a multitude of sins, I think. Some verse like that. Good writing can cover a multitude of sins. But that is not the case for a lot of y'all. And I will say, like, a lot of this is my personal preference, my taste, like what I consider good writing, what I consider relationships that seem realistic, that are representative of my experiences as a lesbian, that I think are fun and interesting dynamics, that I think aren't ridiculous and stupid. You know, I of course am going to be biased in being someone who, like, obviously isn't white, is femme for butch, and is really into like the butch femme lesbian subculture in a way that a lot of lesbians and a lot of people in lesbian communities aren't necessarily. But I think like the fact that the huge swathes of like this genre just have no acknowledgement of even the existence of like truly gender non-conforming women and gender non-conforming lesbians is so strange to me. Like, I don't know. I don't fuck with that. I mean, I think the peak example that combines all of the things that I'm talking about, it combines all the things I'm talking about in the sense of being good against all the ways that I think things are not good and are part of the genres that I think like lend themselves better to that aspect of female romance, historical and young adult, is Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Melinda Lowe, because it is a historical fiction novel, and it's a romance novel at the heart of it, but it's also like a young adult story about the coming of age of our main character, Lily, who is Chinese American, lives in San Francisco's Chinatown during the 1950s, and it's like the height of the Red Scare. She is studying like STEM, and the only other girl in her math class is this girl named Catherine, who's this Italian American girl, and they both end up going to this lesbian bar called the Telegraph Club and get involved with the butch femme subculture there. And I think like that's so beautiful and amazing, and their romance is so compelling and sweet. We also talked about this book actually on the podcast, so you should check that out if you would be interested as well. That's, I guess, like an example of something that I found really compelling and interesting. But again, like, because it's not a pure romance novel and it has those caveats that I think make a female romance better, historical, young adult, that I think lends itself to being a good female romance, in contrast to a lot of the things that I was talking about, you know. And also Melinda Lowe in this book is like such a fantastic writer, and you know, again, a lot of these other bitches cannot say the same. Like Alexandra Bellafleur particularly, oh god, I cannot deal with her writing. She wrote Written in the Stars and also, I think, The Fiancé Farce. I more recently read The Fiancé Farce. I talked about it in a wrap-up, I think, but I found it so unbelievably corny. And again, it's like a billionaire romance ex, like some girl who is actually, her ex is the asshole like brother of the billionaire or whatever. Some setup like that. I'm not even describing it accurately at all, I know, but also even the cover itself like pisses me off. Like, what do you mean? Like, one of them is a romance cover model, or has been, the one who like is the billionaire heiress type, and the other, I think, I forgot what she does, has a bookstore or something. Anyways, I found this to be so dull and the writing is so lifeless, I think. I don't feel the sexual tension. It doesn't feel real to me, you know? I'm not gonna say that that's true for all sapphic romances, of course, but I think like all the books that I've identified as having like bad writing, it's hard for me to feel sexual tension within writing, within a romance novel if it has bad writing. Like, it's hard for me to find sexual tension between characters that I'm like, I don't really get it, you know? At the same time, of like characters that I don't find like sexy. Like, I think that's the other thing. I think a lot of the appeal for other romance readers, you know, readers of straight women who read straight romance novels, or bi women who read I'm fucking up my consonants. Bi women who read by women who read straight romance novels, or, you know, women who read gay romance novels. Like, part of the appeal is that at least one of these characters is like appealing to you as a love interest. Issue with me is that when I'm reading these lesbian female romances, most of these people are not appealing to me. Again, because I'm meant for butch, and people don't want to write a fucking butch character, I suppose. I guess that might sum up most of my qualms with the genre. Let me see if there's other books I have screenshotted here that I can hate on. Oh my god. Oh, okay, I just remembered. Okay, I have a little bit more hate in my heart for a minute. When Katie Met Cassidy by Camille Perry. This book is butch femme. From what I remember, I read it like 3 years ago at this point. But so terribly written, and our characters are such cunts. I hate them. That's what I remember of this book. A young adult female romance that sucked was Tell Me How You Really Feel by Amina May Safi. Oh my god, the writing was so terrible. And the other book that she wrote that came out from her recently, or maybe the last year or something, also fucking terrible. Like, why is her writing so bad? Sorry, but does anyone feel that way? I feel like everyone loves this book. I hate it. It's so bad. Oh my god, Honey Girl? Bro. Honey Girl by Morgan Rogers. This book annoyed the fuck out of me, okay? So much of it is like touchy-feely stuff, and it's like, this is a romance novel. Where's the tension? Where's the sex? Where's the hot, like, build-up of, you know, running into people, or your hands are touching, or... It just wasn't really there, I think. I think there's just too much exploration of things that I didn't give a fuck about. And our main character was caught up in this like melodrama of her own life and her own decisions in a way that was like, I remember when people were talking about this book years ago, or a year ago, I don't know, time, what's that? About like what they liked about this book and how it was on people's favorites of the year and whatever. Like, they're talking about like how the writing was compelling for them. And for me, it's like, but if this is well, actually, this book isn't even a romance novel per se. I think it's more of a general fiction, but it's not literary fiction, so I think that's why I categorized it as a romance novel in my mind. But it was so like Portland / neg, like, derogatory. Like, it just didn't really do it for me, and I don't know. I think that like I had a similar issue with The Holiday Trap by Rowan Parrish, where we have these like two storylines. One of them is a male romance, and one of them is a female romance. The male romance was kind of forgettable, but the female romance was a little bit infuriating for me, because like she's in this house that's kind of like a queer, spiritual, like welcoming women house, and she's like encountering all these different cool people in New Orleans, and it's really fun for her, but she it's weird because she gets totally enfolded and encompassed into this community like this, and I'm like, I don't know if that's how that works, babes. And also the love interest and the way that their dynamic works is like, again, it's not very sexy or compelling. I think the tension that builds isn't really necessarily there. I feel like it kind of gets there a little too fast. I feel like it's too mushy gushy, like it's too in your feelings, I guess. And I think like that's the thing I'm talking about the character, the characteristic, the nature of like lesbian female romances, of like, why are we all in our like feelings? Like, it's, I feel like it's the reason why we don't have like a grinder. Like gay men get to have a grinder, okay, but lesbians don't get to, because when we have like her or Lex, everyone's posting their problematic opinions on there and talking about all the issues. And I'm doing the same thing, okay? I'm bitching and moaning on and talking about something within the community. Like, they're making their little community complaints. They're not fucking. I think that that is what's happening in quite a few of these books, where these characters are just talking and going through their feelings and trying to talk about like queer community, and it's like, well, are you, where's the tension? Where's the buildup of romance? Where's the sexuality of this? Why does everyone else get to have that, but lesbians don't? I don't like that. Why does the romance genre sort of allocate us to this when we deserve we deserve all the like raunchy sexy stuff that like everyone else gets that I've read? And like, of course a lot of these books like have their own, have their raunchy sexy moments, but again, I think so much of it is like just held back by how poorly written it is. So I don't know. That's my rant. That's my thoughts on the state of lesbian romance fiction, the romance genre. Anyways, if you disagree with me, or if you agree with me, or if you have any additional thoughts, please leave them down in the comments. Please don't call me problematic. Thank you for listening to me complain if you got all the way to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed my rambling, my unscripted rambling for like 45 minutes. And I'll see you in my next one, hopefully, if you decide to stick around. Bye!